at least you would be playing with power if Nintendo hadn't decided to discontinue the NES Classic. Once again, everyone, I'm MonkeyDude22. Thanks so much for tuning in to this commentary. I thought I'd spend a little bit of time today talking about the NES Classic and it being discontinued. Now, I know there's tons of different people out there all over the internet. Everybody wants to be the armchair CEO of the company. Why did they discontinue the NES Classic? Why? It's selling like crazy. It makes no sense. Nintendo is stupid. They don't know what they're doing. Let's calm down a bit. Let's take a step back and let's actually take a look at the events leading up to why the NES Classic was released, and then maybe from that we can understand maybe why they discontinued it. So let's go ahead and take a look at that first. So let's take a look at Nintendo 2016. A couple of months ago, we just announced the Nintendo Switch, the newest handheld from Nintendo, newest home console from Nintendo is unveiled. It's coming next year. It's coming 2017. Oh, by the way, we still have a Wii U here. You should keep buying that, but we have a new system coming out. No one's going to do that. No one's going to buy a Wii U, a dead console, when there's virtually nothing coming out for it over the holidays. I mean, quite literally, I don't think there was a single top-tier game that's coming out that holidays. Zelda Breath of the Wild was supposed to be their biggest 2016 hit, but now we've got the Nintendo Switch coming out, and now we know that Zelda Breath of the Wild is coming out for it. So why are you getting a Wii U? Well, you're not. Nobody is. Nobody cared about it. Nobody even really cared about the 3DS, except for, Pokemon Sun and Moon. And of course, the 3DS sold like hotcakes, but can you find one now either? No, I don't think you really can. So let's take a look at that. Nintendo's got shareholders and investors, right? They need to look like they're making money through the holidays, but they really don't have any hot item for the holidays. They had a Yoshi's Woolly World for 3DS. I think that came out during the holidays, or maybe it was even early 2017. Either way, they really had no big standout games or hardware for anybody to be excited over to go and buy a Nintendo system. So what are they going to do between the holidays and the Nintendo Switch release? Well, you get this guy. You get the NES Classic, 30 retro games for $60. Steal of a deal, right? I mean, I was all over this thing when they first announced it. I thought it was going to be the greatest stocking stuffer in the history of Christmas. Like $60. I mean, this is like a Tickle Me Elmo kind of thing. People went nuts for this. I mean, you're playing with everybody's heartstrings when you announce something like this, or anybody who grew up playing 8-bit games, whether it was on the Master System, whether it was the NES or the Famicom if you're in Japan. Everyone and their brother wanted this thing. It had all of the Marios, it had Zeldas, it had Donkey Kongs, it had Castlevania, Kirby's Adventure, Ninja Gaiden, Final Fantasy, all of these games that everybody loved as a kid. They could now play these games in HD, and they didn't have to go and do some bootleg emulation. They get an Ouya or a RetroPie or anything like that. They could have an official emulation station for $60 essentially is what it was. I mean, because all of these games are digital, they're emulated, HDMI 1080p, perfect, crisp, clear images. The greatest thing ever. And you got to look at it as every single one of these games, if they were on the virtual console, it's selling at $5 a pop, 30 games, times $5 is what? $150? It's a steal of a deal. You got $150 worth of games for $60. You get the awesome little retro console package, and you get the controller, the nice Nintendo controller. Perfect buttons, perfect D-pads, everything that you remember. $150 plus controller, plus all of this value, and you can even use it on a Wii or Wii U, by the way, using a virtual console for that matter, for $60. Who doesn't want this thing? So Nintendo has got this perfect console for the holidays. Perfect stocking stuffer, $60, and they're going to sell bajillions of these things. And then, once they're all said and done with it, they're going to have the Nintendo Switch. They can continue the virtual console. If they really wanted to keep selling the Wii U consoles, which now they're discontinued, or at least they're not manufacturing them anymore. And they still got the 3DS for the virtual console. So this is the perfect thing to tie people over during a holiday season, and it's going to look great for the stockholders, shareholders of Nintendo. They're going to look amazing to those investors. Well, I don't know how many they actually put out, but I know it was at least 1 million of these things that went out. And of course, nobody can find these things unless you're looking on eBay or Amazon for scalpers, right? mean, you're going to find these things now for like $200, $300, I think now, ever since they officially have been discontinued. But here's my theory, and that is that Nintendo never wanted this thing to be a perpetual seller. It wasn't supposed to be like, the Sega Genesis, that they have out there in like, Targets or Walmarts right now, where you can find the same thing for like $60, has like 30 games. Most of them are official Genesis games or Master System games, and, the rest of these generic, games just to round out the system. I don't think they intended that. I really don't, because it makes no sense for them in a business sense. Like I said before, this is 30 games, and this $150 worth of games that they can be selling on their 3DS or the Nintendo Switch. This brand new system that just came out on March 11th, they can sell these games for $5 a pop and make infinitely more money than they would if they kept selling this $60 console. So that's reason number one. It makes no sense for them to continue selling this when they can easily put it on the 3DS or the Nintendo Switch. And the 3DS being around for much longer is a completely another story. I don't think it will be. It makes no sense. The Nintendo Switch is a 3DS killer. If they put a console-style portable Pokemon game on the Switch, it's over. The 3DS is done. The 3DS exists for, Pokemon. And I originally said for indie games, but that is even way better suited for Nintendo Switch now. So that's completely another video. But reason number one, it makes no business sense for them to keep putting this out because they can keep selling these games with no overhead cost. It's a digital download for $5 a pop. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. That said, the second reason I think that they're discontinuing this, modding. There's this huge scene right now where, people were buying RetroPies to basically, or Raspberry Pis rather, to install RetroPie, to install emulated versions of the NES, the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, PlayStation, Master System, Atari, all of these different consoles you can do, in a Raspberry Pi cost, what, $60 now? $50? I mean, you can play all these games for that. But here's the thing. Modders found a way to take this $60 official Nintendo console and put whatever NES game you want on it. Because that's what the NES Classic is, right? I mean, nobody knows for sure what operating system it's running, but it's probably running a version of Android where basically you can drag and drop any kind of ROM or emulator that you want on there, and you can play whatever games you want on it. It's infinite amounts of games that you can keep cycling out. And since Nintendo did not design a way for you to be able to purchase more games on the NES Classic, people took it into their own hands to put whatever games they wanted on it. And unfortunately for Nintendo, it's super easy for anybody to come in and put whatever games they want. So here's the problem. You've got a $60 emulation console right now with an official Nintendo-looking console, an official Nintendo controller. People are just going to turn these things to emulation stations, and no one's going to buy virtual console games. That's reason number two. I don't think that Nintendo sees it in their best interest to keep allowing these things to go out there for people to just mod and put their own games on there. I just don't think that that's what it was designed for. Obviously, when they have the virtual console, that's what they want you to do, and so that's what they're going to keep doing. So I think those are the two big reasons. One, it wasn't supposed to be a tie-over thing, or at least it was supposed to be a tie-over thing. It wasn't supposed to be a perpetual seller. I think it could be. I think there's space for it, but I don't think they wanted that because they really want you to play these games on the virtual console. It makes much more business sense for them to do that. And I don't think that, Capcom or Namco or all of these other, Square Enix, even they have a stake in this too, because they have Final Fantasy on this thing. I bet you $1 million that they signed a licensing deal to have these games on this console for basically a period of probably like 90 days. That's basically what it is. We're going to manufacture X amounts of consoles, and we're going to, your game is going to be on it, but we're not going to make anything after that because we want you to be able to sell your game on the virtual console. That, in between that and the modding, I don't think that there's any other reason why they would discontinue this. Obviously, the fans want it. They sell out immediately as soon as they're in stores, but I think those are the reasons of why that this console was discontinued. It really sucks. It sucks because there's scalpers out there that are now selling this thing as a collector's item for like $300 on eBay or Amazon or anything like that. And it really sucks for the people that really wanted this console, that are not in it for the emulation. They wanted it for this nostalgic factor. You know, they wanted to have it in their collection for, you know, the rest of, you know, time, or at least as long as these things still exist, or at least as long as they're still playable. I don't think that there is any other reason beside those two that this thing is being discontinued. I think it makes a smart business sense for them to only have it as the tie over until the Switch comes out. And I think it doesn't make sense for them to continue selling it because of the modders. That said, what could they possibly do to put this thing out again? Well, if they were going to do the Nintendo or the NES Classic to continue selling it, they would have to close the loophole of people being able to put their own games on the console. Number one, they have to do that. There is no way that Capcom or Square Enix or any of these other, you know, publishers are going to allow these things out in the wild when people can easily just put their own games on it. Makes no sense. That's got to be the first thing. And the second thing is, you know, what do you do essentially? Do you basically make an NES Classic with an internet connection to where people can download games off of a virtual console? I think that makes perfect sense if they're going to do that. And maybe just restrict it only to NES games. And then maybe a couple years down the road, put an SNES Classic out with access to the virtual console for Super Nintendo games. It makes perfect sense. Same thing with the Nintendo 64. Now, even emulators still have problems with Nintendo 64 games. So the fact, if Nintendo ever comes out with a Nintendo 64 Classic with perfect emulation technology, perfectly done, and Nintendo 64 games, I'm spilling all over my words right now. I think that would be amazing, and people will go absolutely crazy over this thing. Will that happen? I don't know. I don't know if that'll happen today, tomorrow, maybe in a couple years. Maybe when technology is cheap enough and they just, you know, they do it. I honestly think that emulation, you know, the people that do the homebrew scene will do this way before Nintendo will. But I could see the Super Nintendo in the future. I really do. I think that what I would like to see next, though, you know, maybe you do an NES Classic version 2. Because let's remember, on top of the front loader, they also had the top loader where you could put the Nintendo games on. So I could see them doing an NES Classic 2 that has the top loader kind of feel, where basically they could make it so that if you had an NES cart, you could plug it right in and you can use the NES cart that you already have. Or they could just add an Ethernet port or, you know, Wi-Fi, and you could download games off a virtual console. I think those are more viable options that if Nintendo was going to keep selling this thing, that's what they should do to keep this game going. And that's really all that I have to say about it. What do you think about what I think personally about the reason that these things are discontinued? What do you think is the reason for them being discontinued? Would you purchase an NES Classic 2 if maybe it had top loader technology where you could put your own games on it or download the games from the virtual console? Is that something you'd be interested in? What about a Super Nintendo Classic? Would that be something interesting to everybody out there? I think it would. I think that I would personally buy it, especially if it was at $60. I mean, I could totally see them selling it for like $80 or $100. Same thing with the NES Classic. I could see it. But what do you think? Do you think they're going to end up putting one of those out there? Let me know in the comments section below. If you like these commentary videos, or if you like more support style videos, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, or anything in between, make sure you hit the like and then subscribe to the channel. I do all sorts of videos all the time. I upload weekly, and I'd love to have you along for the ride. Thanks again for watching, everyone. I'm MonkeyDude22, and I'll see you in the next video.